I've invited President Cindy Davis, Mike Pfeiffer, and Russ Manning to join me here on stage to lead our discussion today. We're going to focus really on two main topics. One is to talk a little bit about the code development process and how we have developed changes for the next code development cycle. As you know, after each cycle, we do an assessment. And this past cycle, the board of directors appointed a blue ribbon committee to make recommendations on how to improve the process. And today, Mike and Russ are going to talk a little bit about what those changes are and field any questions you have about that. And then after we're done with that, we'll just open the floor for any questions or comments. As we've said in years gone by, we really want this to be a conversation and not a presentation. So I would encourage everyone to, if you have questions or comments or ideas are really, really good. Please feel free to speak up. The microphones are in the front of the room, and the AV folks said when you come up here, make sure you adjust the mic. I'll let Mike and the moderators. Yeah, thank you, Tim. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Mike Pfeiffer to start our conversation on code development.
All right. Thank you, Dominic. Thank you, Madam President. As Dom indicated, we've got some changes afoot. First and foremost, I do want to formally introduce the quieter version of Pfeiffer.
Much.
He'll be taking over my position, sometime in the spring of next year, first quarter sometime. He's got an extensive background. He's in architectural engineering. He's a PhD, so he's up here. Pfeiffer's down here. But again, he's taken over, and he started basically in the middle of April. So he's getting, we got the firehouse opened up, and he's drinking from the fire hose right now. So, he's a process guy, which is, as indicated in Dom's introduction, it's all about the process. There's idiosyncrasies in the that happen and stuff like that. And as I also told Dom, I said, something comes up when I'm with the however many kids I've got now and grandchildren, I will be available for assistance. So again, that's Russ Manning. So please get to know him. Please welcome him and that. As Dom indicated, what's important is the board always is looking for opportunities to change. If you look at, back in 2000, we had basically 3 one-year cycles between editions. We had a 2001, 2, and then we built in a 2003, and then we went from that to the 07, 08, 08, 09 cycle, where we basically broke it in half, and then we are at the current cycle where we went every one cycle in between editions. And during the process, the board of directors are always looking for ways to change and improve the process. Everybody knows that when it comes to code development, CP28 is the gospel. That's what we follow. That's the procedures. That's the policies. So the board is always looking for changes. Michael Witch's past committee, the Long-Term Code Development Process Committee, was very active in making significant changes to CP28. And they also made the recommendation to the board to change the process. The recommendation originally came from the Industry Advisory Committee as well as the strategic partners. In a nutshell, what's going to happen is the current process, as we all know, is a committee action hearing. Oh, there you go. I should have said that. There's a QR code up there on that screen. If you point your phone at that thing, you guys are way ahead of me already. So yeah, you can see some of this. You can see some of the spreadsheets that are posted on the website. So in a nutshell, the process, unlike the current process, which is committee hearing, public comment hearing, OGCV, rinse and repeat for Group B. Going forward, starting in 2024, which means code changes due January of 2024. Committee action hearing, and then another committee action hearing in the fall. So you're like, wait a minute, why are we doing that? We're doing that for the simple reason that we want to really maximize the expertise of these committees. Because otherwise, they're one and done. They get appointed for a committee action hearing, and then they're done. This way, they come out with their recommendations from, like, let's use Rochester, they came up with their recommendations. If this was the new process, right now we'd be having the same group committee acting on comments to those proposals. So in other words, the committee acts, they make recommendations, the participants then have an opportunity to then say, hey, committee, you said this, what do you think of this? So that's why we're going back-to-back committee action hearings. So you have one in the spring, one in the fall for the Group A codes. Then in the second year of the cycle, same game. Committee action hearing in the spring, one in the fall. So you're like, well, wait a minute, whatever happened to the membership vote? Where's all that at? That's all going to happen in year 3 of the new process. So what you've got is you're going to have a public comment hearing in the spring of year 3, followed by the OGCV. So in past cycles, in the current cycle, we're effectively done with code development at the end of year 2 and the OGCV. Now with this process, we're effectively done with the cycle basically in April, May of the 3rd year, and we're done with the process. We're still going to be working to get the codes done in a timely fashion. We've been losing a little bit of time, but I think at the end of the day, it's all about, again, as Dominic indicates, improvements to the process. And I think we're going to find that having the committee more involved, the committee of experts, they were appointed based upon their expertise, being involved in the process. So that's in a nutshell. So it's, instead of it being a 2-year process, January to December, it's going to be basically about almost a 2.5-year process, January through May of the 3rd year. So that's what's going on in the world of code development. I also wanted to make mention of what's going on with our performance code. We are in the process now of, anybody, who here adopts the performance code? Wow. Well, we kind of thought that was the case. And that's one of the reasons why we're doing what we're doing. The performance code was first created in 2001. And you all know, familiar with the code development process, you submit code changes, and the codes evolve. They get updated. They reflect technology. The performance code has not seen that kind of activity since the 2001 edition. So what we're doing is we've actually hired a consultant who is in the process. We're going to basically, the phrase is, we're reimagining the performance code. So we're going to basically take the performance code as it exists and put it on steroids, with the expectation being 3 outcomes. 1, again, based upon the lack of hands we saw for adoptions, hopefully that'll encourage adoptions in the States. 2, internationally. Performance code is a big deal internationally. We're going to now get into that venue internationally. And 3, I got a question again for the code officials and the designers and the architects. Anybody ever heard of alternative methods and materials? Shazam! How about that? Well, what do you use as the basis for your alternative, for your approval? And you don't listen to Sarah. A dartboard? What do you use? We're going to be able to build in requirements, performance objectives into the performance code that will assist, simplify, and possibly even unify alternative methods and materials by way of adopting the performance code. So that's a big ticket item for any of you designers, engineers, and code officials who are tasked with rendering those kinds of approvals. Okay? The third thing that's coming down the pike, and then we'll open up turn it back to Don for questions and the like. We are also reimagining our look and feel of our iCodes. In 2024, we are going to go to a single column format for the print version. We're still going to have digital code premium, but we found that a single version is going to be more contemporary and definitely increase in readability. We're going to be shading the tables so they're a little more easier to read. We're basically looking, again, the Code Council clearly is expanding. You heard that earlier by both Dom and Cindy, in terms of general code and NTA. Again, it's the Code Council family of solutions. It's no longer just the International Code Council. And this is just another step in the process of the evolution of codes and the evolution of standards. So that's what I wanted to bring to your all attention is the new process in 2024, the performance code activities. Again, if you get onto the ICC website and you go to the search, just type in performance code. You will see the latest report that was just posted on Friday that kind of captures exactly where we're at right now. So again, performance code on the search, and then give you a heads up. And I believe at the Resource Center outside the door, you can actually see some prototype mock-ups of the IBC in terms of what it's going to look like in 2024.
Is that all?
That's all I got.
Thank you, Mike. Are there, well, first I should ask Russ. Russ, do you have any comments? Anything you'd like to?
It's hard to follow up after.
I know. You're coming behind a person with big shoes to fill. But
yeah, I just want to say for those folks that I haven't had the opportunity to say hello to, I look forward to working with you guys. I look forward to carrying the legacy forward that Mike and the rest of the team have put forward. It's going to be hard to fail with the process procedures that Mike has set up and laid out over the last 3 decades. But again, I just look forward to being part of the family and continuing to carry this legacy forward. I've given up on the idea that we're going to fill Mike's shoes. I think we're just going to retire those, memorialize those in the wall. But thanks for bringing me on board, and look forward to being part of the family.
absolutely. If I give you one piece of advice, watch those moderators. I'm telling you.
Well, he's already passed the test. Even before he was hired in April. He was in Rochester for a couple of days. And he spent a couple of days with the moderators. And I fully expected to wake up in the morning with an email, Mike, I think it's not going to work out. And that didn't happen.
Yeah, I had a meeting right after that I had to go to, so I didn't call Mike for about a week. So he's a little surprised when I called him back.
Well, thank you, Mike. Thank you, Russ. And welcome aboard. So let's open up the floor for questions about the code development processes. Are there any questions or thoughts? Or?
Oh, anybody but Thomas.
Aha. Frequent flyer.
Yeah, you might say that. I don't know if that's a good thing or not. So I was only going to say one thing, and then Mike talked, and I got 3 things. Number one, I totally support the new process. I think it's a great idea. I think it gives proponents a chance to get 2 bites at the apple with the committee. It really provides that chance to say, okay, committee, you told me you liked it, but we need to fix it, and that's what this is really going to do. So I think that's great. The performance code, I tell people now, use the performance code to evaluate alternate design methods. I don't necessarily say you have to adopt it, but you can definitely use it as a guide. So I think the performance code getting updated is the other thing. The other thing is, I understand maybe that the board's already discussed this, but the board shadows need to be involved with the code development process. They need to experience that. That's really, as Mike said, it's our middle name. And so I think it's really important that the board shadows at least attend a few days to see how the sausage is made. So if the board's looking at that, I think that's great too. Thanks.
Good comment, Steve. Thank you. Cindy, did you want to say anything
It's
about the shadow?
definitely on the board's agenda to continue that discussion to see what parts of the conference are most important for them to participate in. So that discussion will continue.
Thank you, Steve. Sarah.
Couldn't resist. First, I love this man. Known him 36 years, so. First, Thomas and I may not always agree on everything, but we've come to the conclusion probably 95% of the time we do. So the 2 bites at the apple, love it. What's old is new. Performance code, okay? I was all buy into fully the reimagining, building. In my business, I'm a building life safety code consultant. It is the basis for whenever I do an alternative design. I agree, most people in general, whether you're a code enforcement or design side, are not familiar with this document, and it is so powerful. And I've fielded so many questions about how it is integrated or intended to be used in the iCode package. And most people are really, they're like, it just gives you somebody else all the power. It's like, oh my God, no, do you not understand there's this part about stakeholders and you're right there at the beginning. Now, I do have a question about implementation of how this new reimagined performance code will make it into the I codes. Because right now, it is an I code, and we are struggling on my community side, the fire protection side, shall we say, to get it referenced even in any of the other I codes. Now being in a somewhat standard form, who is going to have to be, is ICC going to be put it in there someplace? How is it going to be integrated now? Is it going to be in Chapter 1 under the alternative engineered design?
Right.
Does somebody have to make that code change to do it? Or because this has been a task taken under by the Code Council, will they put it in? Because otherwise, it's going to be a battle again just to get it into the book.
Sarah, I think that's a really good fundamental question. It's something that we have kicked around a little bit. And I think because this is going to be a multi-year process, 3 to 5 years.
Oh, yeah.
So as the plan begins to gel, that's one of the questions we're going to have to answer.
Because why bother fixing it if you're not
Sure.
going to really
Yep.
buy into what it
Right.
means in the system?
You may also, again, Google Performance Code on the search at the iccsafe.org, because it's about a 25-page report. And I didn't get into the details, but there's been multiple roundtables that have occurred, and that was one of the biggest ticket items that has been discussed. So if you look at that report, you'll see the different ways it can be utilized/implemented. But again, as Dominic indicated, it is a TBD.
Yes, and I've read the report, and that's why I'm asking this question. But thank you.
Stay tuned. Russ, add that to your list.
Thank you, Sarah.
And Mike Pfeiffer, from the bottom of my heart, thank you.
Thanks, buddy.
Okay, Hope.
So I love this idea of the new process that you have established. I think it's such a great idea. My one question, and it's not on the performance code, but are you planning on incorporating the IECC back into this process, or will it continue under the current process to be developed?
I'll take a shot at that, but again, the jury's still out. But my expectation is the council, as you know, Hope, got all the feedback. Some people were in favor of it going that direction. Some people were not. You've been very active in the IECC process. It's been extremely deliberative. Never
been on any of those meetings.
And again, clearly it's up to the board if something, but again, you got to keep in mind, I think it's kind of premature to make any kind of assessment because you want to find out, did it work? Right? When you put out the 2024, the biggest benchmark is, and that's because of the board's direction, was by definition, we've got to increase energy efficiency over the 2021. So then the question is going to be, okay, we got it. Are we getting X percent? Is that good? To coin a few phrases from my friend Mr. John Belsick, is the juice worth the squeeze? Because it is a very deliberative process. I mean, I've been paying attention, and just to give for the benefit of those folks, the ICC, the standards process is so deliberative. We've had 40 main committee meetings, 20 for residential, 20 for commercial, and we've had over 100 subcommittee meetings. So that's a little bit different than going to the committee action hearings and spending 14 days at the CAH, and basically then you get comments, PCH, you're done. So it's a lot more deliberative. So again, I think let's see what happens. Let's see what the outcome is, and then I would imagine that will then generate some kind of report saying, you know what, it's perfect, it's working, or it needs tweaking, or whatever happens to happen.
Thank you very much, and thank you for all the service that you have done for us.
Thank you, Hope.
Any other questions or thoughts on code development? Hi, John.
Congratulations, Mike. Really, thank you. Cindy, we go back to many opportunities that the board had to look at the code development process. I mean, it's great that we keep doing that and doing it and making it better. You talk about expectations. I really had an expectation that we would do more than one cycle every 3 years, and we're here now. But my request is to give the Code Correlating Committee some more latitude. The members don't want a difference between the residential code and the building code unless there is a specific reason to have a difference. And it's just because of the cycles and we deal with different committees that we get different answers. And I would request that the Code Correlating Committee have the opportunity to recognize that we need to correlate our codes. I could give you several examples, but you know, we're moving in the right direction, really. And thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, John, for those comments. You know, the scope of the ability of the Code Correlation Committee is always debated and as to how far they should be able to go. But I understand what you're saying, and we will continue to have those discussions to see what might be able to be done. You know, the one thing that I will say, though, is that the IRC is meant to be a standalone code. So I'm not sure that the correlation is as important to be there, but I'm sure there are some things that we can take a look at when there are conflicts, and we will look at that. So thank you for that comment.
Thank you, John.
Aye.
Dun, dun, dun. Hi, Tim.
Just have one comment. Cindy, both you and Dominic, when you were giving your reports, you both kind of mentioned the Surfside issue in existing buildings. You didn't give us a lot of information on what's come out of that. Can you elaborate a little bit on where we're going with that and what's being talked about?
Yeah. So I'll tell you about the initial stages, and then Mike could, I think, fill in the blanks. So we have, again, worked with the Florida legislature. The Florida legislature approved a bill requiring all buildings of a certain height and occupancy to be assessed periodically. And it's a monumental piece of work, because there's some 300,000 high-rise buildings in Florida. So we have been working with the state of Florida to develop two tools. One is a guide, and I think that's posted on our website, at least a draft, a guide for enforcers, owners, and engineers or designers. And then the second thing is we're working on a technology tool, a portal, for the reporting of those assessments. So that's the Florida piece, but I think we're planning on taking the whole question about maintenance and assessment of existing buildings a little bit further than Florida.
We are indeed, Tim. We're using the Florida model to get that's kind of a jumping off point, if you will. But again, as Dominic indicated, the Florida legislation is unique to basically condo buildings, 3 stories or higher, and that's it. You know, it's not other buildings. We are developing, it's on my plate, to basically create a national existing building guide. You know, that basically goes into the property maintenance code and grabs out the requirements, goes into the fire code, and basically put in a compilation so somebody can adopt this document and provide the inspectors, the engineers, the structural engineers, the tools in order to go in and do these things. But then, like Dom said, the biggest thing then, it's always going to be the challenge as to where is the threshold? What's the threshold? The legislature, when it happened, we put together 4 or 5 different drafts for the state of Florida, covering all buildings, not just condo buildings. But the legislature focused just on, again, what happened at Surfside, and that was just the condominium buildings. But we're taking it now and going to do a similar document for all occupancies and for all hazards. The focus of the Florida legislation is strictly structural. Strictly structural. We're looking to expand that to structural, life safety, egress, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, fire safety.
Doug.
Doug Harvey, if I may be permitted to expand on that just a tiny bit.
Please.
Being from Florida, I am directly involved in it, and we've been evaluating the legislation. In response to what I think Tim was trying to get to, the building departments, according to that legislation, are really just the repository of the information. I'm very happy to hear what you just said, Mike, because I'll look forward to that coming out being more of a complete assessment and guide. Right now in the legislation, it does apply to the buildings that are more than 3 stories, and it gets into the co-ops, the condos, the hotels, virtually everything. And then there are time frames based upon relative closeness to the coast. Right. But it has to be done by a structural engineer. And then the report has to be given to the building department. If the report says, hey, this building might be falling down, then at that point the building department is required to issue a letter or a notice of violation for repairs to be made. And there is, I believe it was a 180-day response to that notice that has to be given. And then once they respond to it, then they have 1 year to start the work. Yes. So I will look forward to what ICC has to say. Thank you.
Yeah, and that legislation also has it in 2 phases. You had the phase 1 inspection, and if it fails the phase 1 inspection, then it goes into the deep, lack of a better word, the deeper dive, getting into the structural mechanics. But there is something in the legislation, it's not just structural engineers. The legislation actually says registered architects or registered engineers. So it is both of those classifications.
That's correct. I think the draft did get changed at one point.
Well, yeah, that's by way of example, tomorrow morning, Florida has got the existing building code work group, and there's a call tomorrow at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yes. Thank you.
you,
Thanks
Doug.
for all you do.
Let me follow up with a question to you on that, Mike. Do you know, is the NIST report done on that yet?
No.
No.
No. And again, like it's been it was June of last year, so it's been 1 year and 4 months. I don't know if anybody here is from NIST that can offer any thoughts on that, but something like that's usually a minimum of 2 years, and it may even be longer.
So that may trigger some future changes as well.
I think at the end of the day, I think that's an excellent point, because similar to what we had, as it turns out, based upon yesterday, the anniversary of 9/11, when we had the NIST report we received from and basically the Code Council implemented a lot of changes from that NIST report into the building code and into the fire code. I could feature the same thing occurring when we get the information. The big challenge is all the code officials and engineers and architects know in this room is existing buildings are a lot tougher than new buildings in terms of how do you deal with an existing building, because you know what, it's a challenge.
Good afternoon, everybody. Christopher McGuire, I'm in Smithfield, Rhode Island. I was in Massachusetts for some years. I wanted to ask a question and also offer an option. My question is, speaking about the tragedy in Florida with the collapse, is there a conversation that is including the zoning? Because as far as I can tell, a lot of the challenges that we see when it comes to collapses, it's because something has perhaps been overloaded. In New England, they talk about something called thickly settled. And I'm not entirely certain that's part of the conversation, because when you have too many structures that more than the soil is able to bear, perhaps the zoning really needs to be looked at as well. And I know that we do have a zoning code, and of course it does have to be adopted, and every locality is different. But if there's a conversation with those august bodies that might also net results to prevent these sort of things happening in the future. And this opportunity I'm looking at, I don't know if you're familiar with how the Chapter 1 is done in Massachusetts. It's a Code of Massachusetts regulations, so 780 CMR. 780 CMR actually has a Table 110 inspection. If you've heard of that, 110 is a series of occupancies that are required to be inspected on an annual, biennial, and half-decade basis based on their use and occupancy. So, for example, if you have a multifamily R2, they're expected to be inspected not more than 5 years, but could be more frequent if there is cause. So that, I was wondering if you would consider looking at that as an option as you go forward with these investigations.
I would definitely like to get my hands on that. I have a question, if I may, to you on that. Is there some kind of uniformity in approach in terms of, you got that table you just cited for inspections, is there some kind of uniformity when it comes to how Boston does it versus Cambridge does it versus somebody else does it? Is there uniformity in approach of those inspections, or is each jurisdiction do their own thing?
So it's interesting you lift up those two localities because they have unique properties amongst themselves, so they can't be like the rest of the state. Cambridge has its own, and even some of the licensing requirements in Boston itself are unique to Boston and do not transfer outside. But to go directly to your question, there is not necessarily specific direction on what to look for. It's up to the locality itself, to a municipality, to figure itself out. And because Massachusetts has not adopted IPMC, you end up working with kind of what your best efforts to look at what are your primary life safety issues. With my background, I was able to put together something helpful, and now in my role in Rhode Island, since we have adopted IPMC, it's a lot easier to figure out what you should be looking for without being unduly invasive.
Okay. You read my mind on my next question, which was, what about the IPMC? But you've answered that.
All righty.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you all.
Hi, Grand Ulrich, City of Chicago. So Mike, some people blame me that we got the codes done in Chicago too fast that let you retire in your hometowns. So sorry to everyone for that, but thank you. My sort of question and comment is about the board's recent work with diversity, equity, and inclusion. So thank you for creating the ad hoc committee. That's exciting. I think it was a lost opportunity. They weren't convened in person here as part of the annual meeting. So hopefully that, as that work continues, they become a group that is convening here and can broaden that message. So just wondering if you could talk a little bit about sort of that long-term vision of how diversity, equity, and inclusion are going to be built into the structure of the Code Council.
Absolutely. And Grant, I agree with you. I think this would have been a great opportunity that I'm sure we'll take advantage of in the future. But I think this was Cindy's passion and the board's really strong initiative. So I'm going to let her speak to that.
Thank you, Dom. Yeah, thank you. Because I do like to think that it was a board initiative.
Yes, it was,
You know, the board did a lot of work and a lot of conversations around what the core values of ICC were. And so now on the website we have that statement that's very clear. And the DEI committee met for the first time just very late, just a couple of weeks ago, maybe 1 week ago. And that initial meeting just brought me such optimism as to what's possible with that committee. It's going to be up to them. I agree, it would have been wonderful if they could have met here, but it was so late in the game. Not everybody was going to be able to be here, and hopefully in the future they will be able to be. But we are looking forward to what I think are going to be some important recommendations from that group on how we can expand the building safety professionals overall into areas that have not been included as much as possibly they could be. So I really, December, I think we are looking for their first report of first round of recommendations. So they are diligent. They are as passionate as anyone about what they would like to do and see. Personally, I hope that it does not. I hope at some point it becomes a standing committee and not an ad hoc.
Me too.
So perhaps that'll be one of the recommendations, I don't know, but that will be up to future boards to determine. So thank you for that comment.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Grant. Okay. Any other questions, thoughts, or comments? No. Oh, wait, here we go.
Yeah, sorry for my delay there. Good afternoon. My name is Dan Carlson. I serve as the building official for the city of Wilsonville in Oregon. I also have the pleasure of teaching building codes at Chemeketa Community College in Oregon. You guys have been huge supporters of Chemeketa, and we really appreciate that. We actually have two of your board shadows who are Chemeketa students, Alyssa Stone and Brian Cisneros.
Hey.
That is just so awesome. I got to tell you, this is our next generation. I've been doing this for 26 years, and it's time to start thinking about passing the torch. My question is not really related to that. My question is related to a 2014 survey that ICC put together with the Institute of Building Sciences, I believe. That survey was very powerful because it gave us all a picture of our demographic, of what we're facing in our industry. And the survey had 3,500 responses from people all across the United States. And it said 80% of those who responded to that survey were going to retire in the next 15 years. That was in 2014. That period is halfway gone. I'm suggesting that it might be time to do another survey now that we're through the pandemic, to maybe really truly take a look at where our industry is at, because it is super hard to plan. It's super hard to think about where we need to take and plan for educational opportunities when we don't really know what we're facing for the future. So we all know that we're struggling to find people to fill these vacancies that we have. I've been trying to fill one for 2.5 months with 0 applicants. So it's very, very challenging. I just would ask if you would consider at least redoing that survey so that we can get a better picture of where we're facing.
Yeah, no, that's a good idea. It's an interesting idea. My sense is that between the pre-pandemic retirements and then the Great Resignation, along with other, I think, factors, it would be interesting to understand what we need to do now as opposed to what we thought we needed to do pre-pandemic. So I think it's certainly something that we need to evaluate and perhaps reach out to members again to find out how they're feeling and what resources or information they might need to help fill vacancies and train people for the future.
Thank you, and congratulations on your retirement.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Building Talent Foundation might help fill that void.
Yeah, the Building Talent Foundation?
Yeah.
Absolutely, sure. Yes.
Good afternoon. My name's Larry Weems. I'm the president of ICC Chapter. And I just basically have a knowledge question that I'd like to fulfill for myself and my colleagues back in DC. With the industry changing, and we're seeing government and local municipalities not being able to fill these positions, we're starting to see private sector come forward in the terms of third party. Where do you see third party inspections in ICC?
Well, you want me to go first?
Go ahead.
Okay. The board has been wrestling with this question. I don't think it's any. I think you'd have to be, be living under a rock not to understand that the profession is changing, and for a whole host of reasons. Some of which we have control over, some of which we don't. But the industry is changing, and this is just my personal sense is that no matter if you're a building safety professional, no matter if you're working for a community or a private provider or you're a designer, you know, you still have some of the same needs, and that's information. And that's what I stress to our team all the time, is the Code Council is an information company to provide, you know, contemporary quality information about how to make buildings safer and more sustainable. So, you know, TBD. I know we have a lot of members that work for third parties. We enjoy some of the sponsorships that they bring, and even some of our board members work for third party companies. So I think it's time to sort of embrace them, not to say you have to agree, but you know, there is that level of connectivity, I think, where, you know, we all have, we share something in common, and I think that's what we have to focus on, is what we share in common.
Thanks, Tom.
You're welcome.
You know, those are really good points. Whether you're a public employee or whether you are a private employee, you need the tools to do your job. How that job is done is up to the elected officials of all the jurisdictions, and how they want to provide the customer service for their residents. And I guess we have to leave it at that and just make sure that those that are providing that service have the best training tools and knowledge that they possibly can have.
Agree. Yes.
Hello. Gonna touch the mic. My question was about testing. I'm looking to pursue a Master Code Professional designation. I have 14 ICC certifications. I think that's 9 or 10 tests that I've taken. And they're about $230 each. Luckily, I have the support of my jurisdiction where those are being paid for. But would ICC ever look into decreasing the cost for people who are taking such a large number of tests? Did simple math, and at least for my track, it would be about $6,200.
Yeah. You know, we have a fairly rigorous process to price our products and services, and you know, what goes into determining those prices is what it costs to produce those exams. So, you know, it's always something I think that we're constantly evaluating. But I would say this, you know, it's funny you should say this. I met a person upstairs at the break who was telling me that ICC certifications are now qualified for college credits. And I was fascinated by this, you were with me, by this discussion. So I think the value of ICC certifications is somewhat underestimated. That's not to justify necessarily the cost, but I think it's a great value. And I want to thank you for the goal you set, and I wish you a lot of luck.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good afternoon. Mike Poppich with the City of Indianapolis.
Hey, Mike.
It was a certification question related, since CODA brought it up. I have numerous inspectors on my staff who English is not their first language. And they're very knowledgeable, but sometimes the time limits on the exams, they have a longer time processing the questions. So this came up last year during the member forum in Pittsburgh. A gentleman asked, has there ever been any consideration given to lengthening the time or removing the time limit? Because let's be honest, it's an open book exam. You can either find the answer or you can't. And when I'm on a job site, I've never had a contractor look at me and say, well, you've got 2 minutes to find that in the code or I don't have to fix it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a good question. I'd like to find Mark Johnson, but I'm not sure he's still in the room or not. There he is. Mark, you want to take this? You're going to have to run, buddy. I just want to see if you were awake, Mark.
Yeah, awake. Blood's flowing in the legs. Yeah, on that note, normally when we're looking at the time for the exams, we're always reviewing that. We use data, to see, what is the performance. So we're always going through and reviewing the time on our exams for, each exam edition. So we'll continue to look at that and review it to make sure if it makes sense. Now, that being said, to your point on the open book exams, we're also trying to digitize access to those resources. So you'll be able to access the required documents online. So hopefully, if done right, using automation and digitization, we'll be able to make it even more streamlined. So you could open up any reference you need. And then the question is, how open do we make it? Do we add in search features or not?
Control F.
Yeah.
Right.
But then, the other issue is whether you access it and open up search features, which would speed up the process. So there are things like that we're looking at. We're also looking at technology where instead of having to flip through a book while you're on the exam of the open book, would you be able to search and get to your questionable areas faster? So that would help out, I think, probably even more commensurately than elongating the exam. Does that address the?
It does. And the technology advancements are good. I just didn't know if it's easier to lengthen the time of the exam while the technology is coming online.
Mark, does the cut score, the pass-fail score, does that impact as that gets evaluated?
Yes, and also the rigor of each question. So when we do the cut scoring, we look at each question too in the degree of difficulty. Yes. So the two things we're looking at is difficulty of the questions, but also the technology component by basically making access to the content online during your test experience, and then what search features we would want to add that could enhance the process. But we plan on rolling out the digital access to the resources later this year, and I know Joan O'Neill has been pursuing that with Autumn Saylor on our certification side, and we're going to continue to see how we can improve that using technology as well as looking at the exam itself.
All right. Mike, thanks for the question.
Thank you.
Yes.
Dominic, Jim Strauss, Building Commissioner, City of Wabash. We've had this conversation before, and I've been told, we'll look into it, we'll get back to it, whatever. I'm still concerned that we don't do paper and pencil testing anymore. Because of the simple fact, there are some people that, like, my eyes are going bad and I have a hard time reading the questions on the computer screen. I've taken a couple computerized tests, and I do okay on them, but I like to going into a room and having a nice big table to set out all my code books and everything on. And I was hoping that maybe someday, even if we just did it at this conference every year, if we had a room where someone could study before they, come to conference and then go in the room and take a test, a written test where, I ask that question every year.
I recall the question now, Jim.
I'm going to retire in a couple of years, so I'm not going to answer that question anymore.
Yeah, no. I appreciate your question. Trust me. It keeps us on our toes. It really does. I'm not going to dodge, but I am going to ask Joan O'Neill maybe if I know we're implementing greater accessibility features on our platforms. I'm wondering, Joan, do you think we could bring that same technology to our exams?
Hi, yes. In fact, the digital references that Mark talked about, that is exactly what we're doing, so that not only will the content be delivered online, but it will have those accessibility features. So I think it will address some of what was just brought up. And I will say that the majority of professional certifications have moved to computerized testing. That's just the way that they're mostly delivered. So I think the way we have to address it is through technology and try to deal with that accessibility. Right. So I'll take another look at it, and we'll try to pull out some of those features.
Thank you, Joan. So look for that little blue dot at the bottom right-hand corner of our web property, right? It helps. It's easier to adjust
absolutely.
all your settings, right?
Absolutely, because in digital, it's responsive, right? Whether you're on your mobile device or you're on your browser, whatever it is. So it should be able to deliver what you're looking for. But again, we can pull out some of those features, and we can even show you some samples, just to make sure that we address the question.
Thanks, Joan. Cindy, did you?
Well, the other thing I wanted to mention is the testing site can make accommodations for those that have a disability. So that process, I think he can talk to Mark about how to make those requests for accommodations. He had mentioned his eyesight. If there's a medical condition or something that needs to be accommodated, that can be accommodated.
Thank you.
Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. And I want to thank you for the great work that you've been doing for humanity in general, I would say. And Mike in particular, so I want to congratulate you and wish you happy retirement. But your phone will be off the hook, believe me, due to the depth of knowledge that you have. And I believe that a lot of people will be able to tap in. And thank you for your services. The question I have, I'm from Boston. My name is Mark Joseph, by the way. And I'm from Boston, Massachusetts. And my question is more about construction site safety officers, which I don't feel like the code development says enough about certifications for these people, which that has always been a big issue. I understand that OSHA is taking that as too hard, but I will also like to see something from the code ourselves about certification from some of the code site safety officers. Often you see on job sites, I am the safety officer, but when you ask for qualification and certifications, you can't find much to prove that if they know exactly so what they're doing. And also I like to touch upon the ESS system that just came about, but I know you're going to have something about that on Wednesday, which will be very interesting. But I'd like to know exactly so what you can tell us about that, because a lot of communities, districts, cities are struggling about the way to implement things to make things safer because we're dealing with new technologies now.
Well, Mike, thank you for the questions. As far as the job site safety piece goes, I mean, I think you're spot on. I think our practice has been to let OSHA sort of, that's their mission. And so we're trying to, I think, stay in our swim lane. And but I will say this, if you have an idea, some specifics, the board, our Codes and Standards Council, and we have other tools in our toolbox, guidelines and
I was just going to say a guideline. They maybe say implementing that in a model code could be a bit of a challenge because every jurisdiction is somewhat different. But in a guideline, that's something that you were a little more nimble in terms of being able to develop, and that may go a long way to provide another tool in the toolbox.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. And as far as ES on Wednesday, is it Wednesday?
Wednesday at 8.
Yes, I have to admit I am clueless. It's going to be good, whatever it is, though. Thank you, Mike.
Again, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Mr. Sims, good afternoon. President Davis, good afternoon. Members of the panel. My name is John Fiedler. I'm president of the New Jersey Building Officials Association, and my question is more of a request. As many of you know, the events of September 11th, the anniversary was celebrated yesterday. Those of us from New Jersey, New York, and Pennsylvania, and D.C. will remember that firsthand for the rest of our lives. If we don't know somebody who was affected directly, we know somebody who was affected indirectly, or we lived far enough away to smell the carnage blowing away the next day. So my request really is to respectfully consider for future planning. We know that there's a lot that goes involved in planning these conferences, but please respectfully consider those of us who were affected directly or indirectly by 9/11 to please maybe not have a conference on 9/11.
Sure.
The only reason I'm here today is because it's my 24th wedding anniversary. Also, my wife is with me. But
oh, good.
If it wasn't for that,
Congratulations.
I may be staying home as well, as many of us from New Jersey have decided to do, because to us, we take it personally. We've known firemen, we've known policemen, Port Authority, local policemen. We've known people who have been affected by the health concerns afterwards, breathing in the dust, the dirt, the asbestos afterwards, and dying. So please, we respectfully request consideration that you plan these events accordingly. We understand there's a lot that goes on with it, but please.
Sure. John, thank you for the comment. I don't know what to say it was a tragedy beyond words. At some point, I was watching a program, I think it was a 60 Minutes program on the tragedy, and it focused a lot on the first responders who perished and what a family those first responders are, and how now some of the children of the first responders who were killed in the tragedy, in the 9/11 tragedy, are now beginning to start their careers as first responders. And to me, that really speaks so highly to the heroes, the men and women in the fire service and the other responders who run towards danger when everyone else is running away. So I think your comments are taken to heart. I appreciate that.
We greatly appreciate it. Thank you,
Sure.
Mr. Sims.
Hello, how are you? My name is Salim Huerta. I'm the building official for the city of Troy, Michigan.
Oh.
All right, thank you. So I just wanted to express something. I was not going to get up and talk. I'm very shy, but still did. I was listening to other people speak about a problem that I have seen as well, and I think it comes up every year, and it's about the disconnect of the exams and reality and what we need. I know that everybody makes a great effort at it, but I see a huge disconnect in which there's a lot of people that are highly qualified, but they just can't take exams in the way that ICC presents them. I see inspectors that have tried so many times. They're amazing inspectors, and they still can't pass them. So I strongly suggest that we look into that. I know it's a very difficult topic. The other thing is the United States right now, it's in need of inspectors, desperate need of inspectors. At the same time, we're slowing down that process because of the way we are taking those exams. I've taken a couple, and they're very, very difficult to pass. And it's just that the group of people, me included, that take those exams, our brain plasticity is not the same as a young college kid. Right. So it's totally different. We apply knowledge by experience, not by memory. And that's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, no.
Thank you.
I appreciate that very much.
Dom, it might be a good time to reiterate that I believe that applications are now open for exam development committees.
Oh.
And I think they are open until the end of October or something around there. So one of the things that happens in preparing an exam is that those questions are developed by experts in the field such as yourself. And we have a call for committees out to help to develop and write those questions all the time. So those are the folks that are determining what folks need to know. And then, Mark had talked earlier about evaluating those questions because they are evaluated and they have to pass certain psychometric criteria. So if a question is failing and people aren't answering it correctly, they do go back and revisit that and see what the problem is. Should it be taken out? Should it be removed? Is it worded incorrectly? So those exam development committees and who sits on them are pretty important. So this is a great opportunity to put a plug in to apply if you have an interest.
Yes, I totally have an interest. I applied for the committee, was not accepted. So maybe we should open the channels a little more.
Absolutely. Thank you. Any other questions? Going once. I want to thank you for your participation today in our members forum. We've taken notes, and we'll be thinking a lot about your comments and suggestions that you offered today. Cindy, any final thoughts from your perspective?
No, I have none other than to just thank the members for their interest, to see the number of people sitting here in the room willing to listen to the improvements in the code development process that will be implemented, to show the interest in which codes will be implemented and how they will be. The room could be empty and it's not. Thank you for your interest and thank you for your support and all that you do for the Code Council and the communities you serve.
Thank you, Cindy. So before we end the session, I have a few quick announcements. The expo will continue today through 7 p.m. Please join us this evening for our expo reception at 5 p.m. in halls A and B. You'll have an opportunity to network and make new contacts. Tomorrow, our awards luncheon begins at 11:30 in this room. The full award schedule is available in the conference, on the conference app and on the Code Council website. On Tuesday evening, we'll be hosting the Connections Gala, also in this room at 7 p.m. At this event, we'll be installing new officers and members of the Board of Directors. Please join us for a reception prior to the gala event at 6 p.m. for a chance, again, to network with colleagues and peers. This has been a great opportunity. I very much appreciate the opportunity to hear what's on the members' minds and to have a conversation with so many knowledgeable experts. But before I end, I'm going to give the floor.
I just want to say thank you. And as I indicated upon the privilege of receiving that honor, and again, we heard it a couple times, we need involvement in volunteers and committees, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Your legacies, you know, the new folks that are here, that's the future. Please get involved.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you everyone for your attention today.